But for a normal person, it is impossible to have a heroin problem and a decent life at the same time. And I want a decent life, you know what I mean? They weren't getting no clear pictures of me, they weren't getting no fingerprints or DNA. I mean, I always thought that me giving up was just around the corner. But what I didn't like was, it's just not a very nice environment. You know, no, he doesn't care. But then he doesn't care about going to jail. I do. I don't want to be in prison. You know, like whenever I did the lorries, I always had gloves on, mask on. You know what I mean? They weren't getting no clear pictures of me. They weren't getting no fingerprints or DNA. You know, I'm not interested in that shit. No prison for me, thank you. I went once when I was about, well, I went a few times to young offenders institutes and that, but proper big man jail, I've only been once and I didn't fucking like it.
How was that?
I mean, it wasn't really bad, but I just didn't like it. You know, I didn't hate it. It wasn't like, oh, don't pick up the throat and all that. You know, those stereotypes. I mean, maybe it's like that in American prison. You know, like prison gangs based on race and people getting bummed in the shower and all that. Maybe that goes on in like fucking Attica, you know what I mean, or Rikers Island, those big American jails. But it doesn't go on in Strangeways, so I didn't see it anyway. But what I didn't like was, it's just not a very nice environment. You know, it doesn't smell nice, everything seems dirty and old. Everything is dirty and old. It's a Victorian jail, for God's sake. Think of how many tens of thousands of men have passed through those cells, been on those beds before you, stood in those shower stalls. It's just minging, isn't it? And there's always, on every wing, there's always like the knobhead, you know what I mean, who wants to throw his weight about. Luckily, because I'm not a known entity in the criminal underworld, I've got a few mates who, you know, I've got a few links to it, but I'm not a Charlie Big Spuds myself. So there was no reason for anybody to try any shit with me. You know, I didn't have anything that was worth robbing. You know, if you go into, even if you're an unknown guy, if you go into jail with a parcel of drugs, you know, you'll get attention, the sort of attention you don't want. But I thought about taking a parcel in, but I knew I was going to Strangeways, so I was sensible enough to think, look, if I'm really that desperate for a spliff, I can buy one off somebody. But if I go in with my own parcel, I'm going to end up getting spooned in the pad.
What, you can take your own parcel into the...
No, parcel of drugs, like wrapped in cling film, shoved up your ass.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
No, you can't just walk in with ground pea for a string.
So,
but yeah, I didn't like prison.
So what other than relationships being damaged, what else was negative during the stint of you?
Well, really, that I couldn't have a normal life. You know, I knew that I needed to have money every day. There needed to be cash every day. And I knew that I wasn't capable of saving money. So I knew that several times a week I was going to have to engage in activity that put me outside of the societal mainstream, if you like. You know, and it's just not very nice being on the edge of society all the time. And also, it's just to people who know what to look for. It's very obvious if you've got an active heroin addiction, and you don't want to be that guy. You know, with the tiny little pupils and the sunken cheeks, and you know, I mean, I still look a little bit heroin-y now, 2 years down the line. You know. But when you're actively enthralled to that drug, it's really obvious to certain people, and I just didn't like it. I felt like I got looked at all the time, and I also, you asked me before if I thought I was better than some of the kids at that centre. I didn't think I was better than them, but I do think I'm better than your average heroin addict. I know that sounds like a terrible thing to say, but I think most heroin addicts have just fucking given up on themselves. I don't think I'm better than them per se, but I think I'm better than what they've become. And if you're not careful, you turn into one of them, because you give up yourself eventually. And I think I was on the verge of giving in to addiction, and it frightened me, because I do want to have a bit of stability in my life, you know, find a nice girl who doesn't take any drugs, settle down, maybe have a couple of kids, buy a house, whatever, have a career. And none of that was going to happen. I mean, there are occasionally people, like, have you heard of the author Will Self? He's did you ever see Shooting Stars?
No.
It was a panel show that Vic Reeves and Bob Mortimer used to do back in the day.
Okay.
Will Self used to be one of the panellists on it. But he's an author from London, but he's what they call a high functioning heroin addict.
Okay.
So he's on heroin, but he's got a normal life. But you say a normal life, being an author isn't really a normal life, is it? You know, if you're an author by trade, you probably had money to begin with.
Yeah. So you've got enough money to
Yeah,
facilitate
because it takes 3 or 4 years at least to write a decent novel, and who's paying for your heroin addiction while you're doing that? So he must have had money to begin with. So he's not really a high functioning heroin addict. He's just a smackhead with a lot of money. You know, I mean, Keith Richards could say he's a high functioning heroin addict, but if you're in the Rolling Stones, you can be high functioning, can't you? But for a normal person, it is impossible to have a heroin problem and a decent life at the same time. And I want a decent life.
So is that something you always knew while you were in there?
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, I always thought that me giving up was just around the corner. But then more time passes and more time passes. And it wasn't until I got to 30, 31, I thought, fucking hell, Henry, you're practically middle-aged and you're still doing this childish shit. Because it is quite childish, really. When you've had a nice upbringing, which I have, and you've got family who care about you, and friends who want you to succeed and will fight your corner, don't just say they will, but they actually will. Because everybody's got friends who are like, yeah, I'm there for you, but a lot of the time it's bullshit. But some of my friends have demonstrated through their actions that they are there for me. And that's a great asset to have. And if you've got family and friends who care about you, if you're willing to put the work in yourself, you can have a really nice life. And I just knew that my life with drugs in it was just going to continue to get worse and worse and worse. The only problem is now, I still have the occasional dabble, because if somebody comes round and they're like, do you want a lick, Henry? I'll be like, yes mate, here's a lick. But it's only if, you know, if somebody turns up and they've already got it. I won't be the guy who's like, let's go and score.
So do you think it's your influences that are
definitely
keeping you in it?
Yeah. Which is why I've cut a lot of people off. You know, a lot of people, I won't have them in the flat anymore. Because they don't respect your home, they don't respect you. You know, if you're a junkie and you've got junkie mates, your flat is just somewhere they can smoke their junk.
So using you.
Yeah. And it's a hard reality to face up to. But you have to. You know, you have to be really blunt about it and be like, this guy's just fucking using me. You know.
So what were you not expecting?